Hi, everyone, and welcome to All's Authors Books and Chit Chat with Aging and Amazing. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. I'm Marianne Shuko, a founder and manager of All's Authors, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. And I'm the author of Blue Hydrangeas, an Alzheimer's love story. I'm joining you today from lovely old England, where I'm enjoying my spring break. I'd like to introduce some of the members of our team who are with us today. Christy Byrne Yates, who is the author of Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation. She is my podcast co-host and producer and co-moderating this event. Hello, Christy.
Hi, everybody. Greetings. I am also traveling, so Marianne and I are being really, really cool and international. So I'm in Rome right now, so I'm delighted to be here. I've been excited for this one.
Yeah, we've been telling people that we're traveling, and people are asking me, "Are you together?" We wish, but we're almost in the same place together.
That's
I
right.
wonder if we're closer to each other than we normally are.
I know, that's so funny because
We are.
I think we're closer now
we
than we
are.
usually are. But
Yeah, I think-
Marianne and I did finally get to meet in person last fall. So this is really fun for us that we're over on another Well, we're not on the same continent. You're on an island. I'm on a continent. But yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Anyway, delighted to be here and really happy to meet you, Deborah. So can't wait to get to this.
Yeah, I'm so glad we were able to put it all together, even though we were on the road, so to speak, or in the air. Anyway, we also have Malika Moore with us tonight. Malika is the founder of Aging and Amazing, which strives to support older adults, caregivers, and the networks that surround them with resources and community. Hello, Malika.
Hi everyone. I'm on my tablet today, so a little reorientation. But hi everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And we have Kate Newkirk, who is also from Aging and Amazing and is joining us for the first time. Hi, Kate.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to meet you. We have a little bit of housekeeping. The event is being recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel. We will also produce it for our podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. You can listen to our podcast on all the major podcast sites like Apple and Spotify, and you'll find it on our website, allsauthors.com. If you want to know when the replay becomes available, check your email. The announcement will be made in our weekly or bi-weekly newsletter. If you don't see it, please check your spam or email us at allsauthors@gmail.com. If we don't have you on our mailing list, you may sign up on our website or watch for it on the book club channel in the Aging and Amazing community. So I think we're ready, so let's get started. Our author today is Deborah Tan, an educator who began her professional career in higher ed as a professor in political science for 14 years. She then planned, implemented, and executed an independent Christian school for 14 years. She has now taken her skill set and transitioned her platform to that of dementia education. She is the CEO of Reminiscent, which serves as a hub for community education as it relates to dementia education. She's a certified dementia educator, certified Dementia Friends champion, and a certified virtual dementia tour facilitator. She's also a lecturer in her spare time at Georgia State University in the Gerontology Institute, teaching premier classes in dementia and death, dying for graduate and undergraduate students. She's also the author of The Race of Dementia, our book for discussion tonight. Welcome to Books and Chit Chat, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. Deborah's been with All's Authors now for a number of years. She's also been a guest on our podcast, which was a while back, and I know that a lot of things have changed since then. But if you could tell us a little bit about your dementia journey and what got you into all of this, because it seems like you're doing dementia full time.
You're absolutely right. In 2016, I started noticing some things. Well, actually, let me back up one step, if you will. In 2015, 2016, I was in the process of closing or selling my private school. And I immediately thought, hey, I'm heading back into higher ed for the latter part of my career. Unbeknownst to myself, it was a traditional trajectory change that I wasn't uh, expecting, if you will. I did, however, begin to notice simultaneously some differences with my husband at the same time. And I just kept paying attention to details, and it was very different for me, a totally different experience. And what I deduced rather quickly is that it had to be something medical because the behaviors that I was witnessing and experiencing were the antithesis of what I had known at that particular point of like 27 years of marriage. We've been married for 35 years now. And so that is what initially um, piqued my interest in what honestly, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just Googling. I had some time on my hands, and I just kind of kept reading and kept delving into the research and constantly just beefing myself, becoming stronger in behavioral changes. And so that is the impetus. That is how I landed myself into this space of which now I've been for 8 years.
Okay. Can you describe some of the changes that you were noticing with your husband?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everything was behavioral. Um, there was some forgetfulness, yeah, but it was more behavioral. And I think that what really, and for 2 years, I had worked on influencing, persuading, encouraging him. Let's go to the doctor. Let's get this checked out. But of course, there was something wrong with me, according to him, versus the behaviors that I was witnessing. But one thing about my personality is that I have great tenacity, and I like to think I have negotiation skills and collaborative abilities. And I just began to use my many hats of expertise. And long story short, I did finally in 2017 encourage him to go to our primary care physician. And I described to her just three things because I thought I didn't, well, I did actually. I did though. After 2 years of research, I did actually know a thing or two. So I went to the doctor's office with him and I explained three things. And I described the behaviors. One, he put the milk in the, he was looking for crackers in the oven. He put the milk in the cupboard, and keys were his nemesis. And I extrapolated just a little bit on those things, but the doctor was keen enough to say, I'm sending you guys to a neurologist right now. And so that is what happened.
Okay. And what was that like? What was the visit with the neurologist and any other further evaluation? What was that like for you and him?
When I do my presentations and when I teach others and encourage others in the space, I always say to them, now this is a process, trying to determine what's going on. It's not going to be quick. It's probably going to take 6 to 9 months. And then I go through the battery of testing that they do and that they conduct. And so for us, it was the same thing. Everything that I share and that I teach, I share from the experience, my experience, the lived experience, if you will, of what I know to have happened with me. And typically it's kind of true for others. Nothing in this space is absolute. So therefore, I share that. I use a lot of words like typically, and for the most part, because nothing is concrete. And I share what it would take 6 to 9 months, blood tests, psychological testing, MRI, sleep apnea, just the battery of testing that he experienced. After the battery of testing, it was determined that he had what is called MCI, which stands for mild cognitive impairment. That seems to be the precursor that most doctors will tell you initially, which is why I always share with people, don't be surprised if you get a result of what is called MCI. I think they should change that name, honestly, because there's nothing mild about MCI if you have ever been on this journey. It's a roller coaster ride for sure. So that is what the initial diagnosis was in 2017. I think if you don't mind, I would like to share. I sat on, even when I wrote the book, The Race of Dementia, at this particular point, I had conducted an awful lot of research and I had a little bit of knowledge that I was sitting on in my headspace, if you will. And I wanted to share it because at this point in on our journey with my husband, I could not tell his story before he told his own story. And I think that's really important. I did not get ahead of him because it wasn't my story, it was his story. And until he was ready to share his story, I sat on everything that I knew relational wise and what his diagnoses eventually came to be. I just have that much respect for him and our relationship. And I wanted him to come out first with what his official diagnosis in 2019 was, and it was frontotemporal disease. The organization calls it frontotemporal degeneration, but nevertheless, it's FTD. And that's what the diagnosis was in 2019, which explained all of those bizarre behaviors that I was experiencing and witnessing with my husband. Um, yeah, but I always knew this while, and I say in the book, and I think it's very poignant that I say, because not many people know. I waited for probably, he just began talking about his diagnoses probably in the last 3 years, I want to say. And so for all that time, I never spoke of it until he began speaking of it. But what I wrote in the book is that while divorce was an option, I say this in my book, it was an option for sure. It was never my option because, see, I wasn't giving in and I wasn't giving up. And I knew my husband before FTD. And so, no, that wasn't an option for me. It's an option for many, and I surely don't cast judgment whatsoever. But for me, that was not my option. I knew from the very beginning, didn't know what it was, but I knew it was medical. And I knew that he would need me. And sure enough, 8 years later, yes, we're still together. Well, that was a mouthful. Sorry about that, but I wanted to get that out.
No, it's great, and it's such a journey. And I think that one of the things I hear you talking about that I think a lot of people, I think diagnosis is so challenging sometimes. And I think one, getting someone to even agree to going in to talk to a doctor about it might be a very difficult road to traverse, right? And then also, I really resonate with what you're saying about the MCI, mild cognitive impairment. It's sort of a nebulous kind of thing, and I sometimes wonder, especially primary care doctors who maybe feel nervous about
Absolutely.
coming up calling it something else. There's such a reluctance. Um, and yet, you go through this battery of tests, and like you said, it's just this long time period to kind of get to something. And even if you do get to an actual diagnosis that's something more specific, you're still with this person that you care about and that you want to care for. And it's then learning, like you said, all these behaviors that you were witnessing. It's then understanding what are you going to change in your behavior in dealing with or working with this person, right? Because we have to respond, and that's how we can be helpful to our person, is trying to understand who they are and what's going on, and we might have to adjust our behavior. What do you? I don't know if that's something that you found, but I that's certainly what I've seen in my own life.
If you make the decision to continue on the journey with your loved one, you will alter your behaviors with your loved one. You see, they can't do it like we can. And so you have to be willing to make that your number one priority to live in their world. Now, everybody's personality is not that flexible and malleable to make that. And so it's important that we recognize whom we are and what our capabilities are, and if we are willing to do such a thing, because it is not easy to constantly have to improvise every single day. And so you have to live with the premise that it is the disease, it is not my loved one, and you are highly encouraged, I say, to alter your demeanor and disposition if you want to live in harmony.
Exactly. And yeah, so thank you for that. I think that's important to put out there. And it's a progressive, all of these are progressive diseases. So where you are today might not be where you are next week. And so well, you really have to juggle. And that's challenging, I think. So
Very, very much so. And that is when I do caregiver training. That is one of the most prolific obstacles one must navigate. But first, before you begin the navigation, I encourage honesty with self, because you may not be able to do that. Your personality may be in that, and it's certainly nothing wrong with not able to be flexible like that, because, like you stated, this is almost, in many instances, an hour to 3 hour window of which you're dealing with and constantly changing and moving and adapting, and you're pivoting all the time. And sometimes, for some, that is just not easy. So one must be very honest with themselves, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make them every single day, but that's okay. That is absolutely okay, is to take those mistakes and learn and to do better the next time, because you will be challenged even as you live in harmony.
Could you discuss some of the key points in your book?
What I really like are the takeaways.
Mhm.
I also really like the qualitative interviews that I conducted with individuals, and they told their raw and rich stories, of which many times, as I stated in my book, I walked away picking up the pieces of my broken heart, as I say in my book. And I also love, this is the third one that I love, the scenarios that I place at the back. Okay, here's the scenario. You've read the book. Now here's some scenarios. What will you do? And I think that's awfully enlightening. I think it's enriching, and it bodes well with my teaching dementia at the university. And Christian Texas University is also using my textbook in their nursing program. And the classroom instructor said that's what she finds to be exciting too, is taking the scenarios in the book and allowing the students to be in small group activities and discuss the scenarios and come up with results in terms of how they would handle the situation. And even those scenarios are real scenarios. So my book is real in that it was fairly easy for me to write. It took me 6 months to write it because it was all in my head space. I had been sitting on so much information, so it was easy for me to place that in writing and put it in that of a book, because I had to put my emotions and my energy into something. Because remember, at this particular point, I was not outspoken at all about my personal dementia journey. So I had to take this information and place it in the book in such a way that I wasn't giving that away, but I was speaking truth to power. And in 4 years, much has changed. And in terms of if I were to write another book, what I would share, because I'm 4 years enlightened, I'm 4 years on the lived experience. It would be written in such a different manner. But education is always the bottom line. Dementia education is the bottom line.
very
Yeah.
much, very much. I also want to ask about, and you say this so clearly in, I was reading your Al's author's essay that you wrote when your book was brought into our group, and the race for dementia. It's not just about finding a cure, but that you are shining a light on something that I think is not spoken about very often, and that is how many people of color, Latinos and Black community members are at higher rates for dementia. Can you talk a little bit about where you discovered that in your research and what, um, just, yeah, just speak to that, because I think that that's something we don't talk about enough, and it's really critical to know.
Yes, I would love to speak to that. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to do so. It's a heavy one in that disparate treatments are real in this space. Access is real in this space. The research points out that Blacks and Hispanics are at the top of the food chain for dementia. And my question when I first began delving into the research, and is very prominent in the research and in the literature, why is that so? It doesn't have to be that way. So this is what I'm feeling now that I've been in the space for a while. I am not so confident that it's because Black and brown people don't want to be reached. I wonder how orgs are trying to reach these individuals. Because you see, when I do my local work, and I do a lot of local work, I do state work and national work as well. But locally is where anyone knows, particularly me being a poli-sci background, that is your biggest impact locally. When I work in my local community and surrounding communities in rural South Georgia, people are thirsty for knowledge in this space. They want to know. So I challenge my colleagues, do you really want to reach these individuals? Because I believe if you really sought to reach them, your numbers would be much lower than what they are. And access is key. And so I always ask individuals who wish to come into my community, because I've done the work, I'm in the trenches. What is this going to be? Is this going to be a drive-by? Are you just going to drop into my community and they never see you again and you give them a $25 Walmart gift card? No, 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 no. This is all about relationships. And if you truly want access, if you really want people to come to the table, you have to build relationships. And I'm all about that, which is why I'm so successful.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that I absolutely, it's building bridges, reaching out, and I access, absolutely, and then listening to people,
Mhm.
because I feel like, I mean, I'm I'm clearly not a person of color. I just am responding to what I've read and what I know from people, just that I it's not just dementia. This is sort of across so many medical concerns, and yeah, it's it's
It's
important that
real.
we talk. Yeah, it's real, and it's
Yeah.
important that we talk about it.
It's important that we have the conversation. I've been working 2 years alongside two great sponsors that have really supported the work that I do in my community. And I have been working diligently in my community and surrounding communities. And I'm here to tell you, based on my 2 years of, in January this year, 2025, my team and I were so graciously, if you will, endowed with utter participation. We brought a clinical trial to our community with K2 Medical, and we had major success. So one, I am not, again, I'm just not convinced that people do not want to know what is going on. You just got to meet people where they are. But people say that all the time. I'm going to meet you where they are. But see, I take it a step further and I say, I'm going to take you on a journey with me. Dementia education.
Wow. That's a lot.
Right. And I'm wondering where some of our guests are, if anybody has anybody else want to ask a question or chime in.
Malika?
So my hand going across, navigating the tablet. Oh, Deborah, thank you so much for like everything you've given, the knowledge, the wisdom, and sharing your experience. You mentioned how when you were writing your book, you kind of wrote it in such a way where you're balancing educating, but not so much letting people fully into your world. Where you are now currently, how have you kind of merged the two? And my second question is, how has it helped you in your healing journey? Because I know you mentioned, like, we know how this can impact marriage and all of those things.
Hmm. Let's
Gave you a
start with
loaded question.
merging. I'm going to start with your second question first, the healing process. Malika, I really believe that I was healing all along. I'm a woman of faith, and so I was healing all along. I actually soaked a lot of pillows during that time in terms of trying to wrap my arms around all of this. So I believe that I was healing, uh, which has me to the place where I am, where I'm emboldened now. I can speak truth to power because, see, I've been there and I've done that. And I've prayed for strength because I would, in some instances, I would wear my feelings on my sleeves. And I was dealing with behavioral types of things, and they weren't behaviors of what I was accustomed to for 27 years, if you will. So, yeah, I think the healing process for me is ongoing. And I also think the healing process for me is not only ongoing, but because I have the ability and the platform to teach younger generations my knowledge and my experience and my expertise. And I never mention professionally, I never mention the FTD story of my own, because the bottom line, it's really not about me and my journey. It's really about the bigger picture um, of these diseases and how impactful they are. But if any of my students took a deeper dive on me, it would be obvious because, if you type my name, you would know. But nevertheless, I don't put the emphasis on me. Even when I use my book in my own dementia class. I don't personalize it to me. Now, I don't lie either. If someone were to say, Dr. Kim, are you anywhere in this book? I would be very candid and very honest with them. So again, I think that for me, it's ongoing. Healing is ongoing for me, just teaching in my classes because, see, I know I'm helping others. I won't be on the front lines probably much longer. And that I know I've trained a host of students that are going into the space how to navigate the space, if you will. So I think that and all the work that I've been doing is healing for me with my Memory Cafe. It's healing for me with the support group that I've initiated. These are healing processes because that's what this disease and the diseases are. You don't get off the roller coaster; it just keeps going. But you got to know how while on the roller coaster, how not to be scared, if you will, not to be swayed by the turns of the roller coaster and the deep dips that you're going to take. And so for me, healing is ongoing. But again, the emphasis must be placed on the fact that I'm a woman of faith as well. But I'm vulnerable and I'm still a woman. I still have feelings as equally. Those things have not left me, but I just learned over the years how to put the tools in my toolbox that I teach others. So I kind of follow my own prescription, if you will. And you spoke about how do I merge the two? Malika, I don't necessarily go into something figuring out how to necessarily merge the two. And a perfect example is that Marianne asked me, did I want to speak to my personal life? I said, I'll see where the interview goes. But I noticed she started off with that. So she took me there. So I had to go there.
Put it in me too.
So that's kind of how it went. I don't go into it feeling like I need to necessarily merge. When I'm speaking with someone one-to-one, Malika, and I know it's very important at that point to share, particularly if it's FTD, to share, to connect, oh, by all means, I'm going to do that. If I'm speaking to a student who I'm trying to, or no, who I am encouraging to better understand the space, I don't need to put Deborah in there to do that. So I pick and choose when it is merged. A lot of people still don't even know that I'm Rahab in the book, and that's okay. It's not that important. And the bottom line, again, is that education piece. And so the healing is ongoing, merging. It's just based on who invites me to speak about what.
Mm. That's fascinating because healing is a word we hear a lot from the different authors in our organization who have chosen to share their stories and what they've learned through their books, and also um, through public speaking, starting their own community organizations, healing practices, support for dementia caregivers. I mean, we have many, many authors who are doing that, and they will say it heals me. It makes me feel better. I think when we come to the end of a journey like this, it's natural conclusion. People are left bereft and pretty much beaten up by it, and maybe don't really understand all the ramifications of what they've experienced. It may have been for many, many years, as it usually is. So I find a lot of people, when they take the time to kind of sort out their feelings and examine their situation and write it down or put it somewhere, they realize that can help other people, and that helps them. Because otherwise, I think you're just continue to be in turmoil.
I agree 100%. I don't put any emphasis on where I am because I wouldn't get the work done. I would not be able to help the people that I do and
Mhm.
work in the many, many spaces that I do. So it can't be about me. It must be about others and relationships and making those relationships impactful.
Mhm. Did anyone else in your family have dementia?
On my husband's side of the family, I saw it with his aunts,
Mhm. But
three
not
of
on
the
your
five.
side.
But not on my
Grand.
side. I do believe, though, and I opened my book up with this story about my great grandmother. I honestly believe that that was Alzheimer's disease, dementia. I don't know that for sure. I was a little girl when she died. I was and when I witnessed it, I was in the fourth grade. But
Mhm.
many of the things that I know about Alzheimer's, even in the fourth grade, I remember those behaviors, and I was like, wow. And that's when I started my book off with speaking to my great grandmother, and
Mhm.
that even as a little girl, I wanted answers then. And my mother and my grandmother were unable to do so. And so it's interesting as a full adult, decades and decades later, when it hit my doorstep, I wanted answers still.
Yes, many people have said that they witnessed some dementia in a relative as a child, and in some cases, it ended up defining their lives. Malika, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, my hand up again. I have like a comment and another question. So, in the work that I do as a clinical social worker and a care manager, a lot of times, and even in my personal life, I've seen where you mentioned your husband. I've seen where people have gotten divorces only to find out a few months later that their spouse has a brain tumor or they've been diagnosed with something. So I think when you were talking about that part, it really stuck out to me because I don't know if there's been any research or any studies on how many divorces are connected to some illness. Being there that they didn't know of, but it's just something I've seen common in my career thus far in a few personal scenarios. So I'm glad that you were able to talk about that. And I think it'll bring so much healing to some people because afterwards, sometimes you find out and you're like, oh, I didn't know they had that brain tumor. That's why they were so angry and doing this and doing that. So that's kind of a comment about the marriage and divorce part of illness, or that better or for worse that you mentioned in the vows. That sometimes people don't know that the worst is caused by some illness. The other thing that I wanted to ask you just about in your process, I probably ask this every month, but I noticed that a lot of the writers enjoy journaling. I enjoy journaling. Is that something that you kind of notice, something that you've done to process your thoughts over time? Is journaling a part of your life?
No, actually, it isn't. Now, in the very beginning, I was taking copious notes. That's to be able to report to the doctor what I was seeing, hearing, and feeling and experiencing. But since the diagnoses, I don't do that anymore. But I don't even then, I didn't consider that journaling. I think journaling is essential for some. And what I encourage others to do when I do this litany of things that could be helpful, particularly when I'm doing caregiver pieces with individuals, I always list journaling and how important it could be for you. That just wasn't my thing, Malika, but it works and it's a great idea for so many others.
Deborah, could you, and I don't know if this is something you've thought about, but since writing the book, and as you have continued on your journey as an educator, as a researcher, and your many endeavors around dementia, has anything, have any notions or thoughts about this? Has anything shifted or changed? Like, oh, I discovered this. I used to think it was this. And I'm just wondering if, everything's always evolving and we're learning more and more, but has there been anything that's, I don't know, come to mind for you? Like, wow, I used to think of it this way and now I'm seeing it might be this. I don't know if I'm being clear, but just the evolution of where you are now from where you started doing this work.
It's very interesting, and I really appreciate the question because it allows me to be able to speak to what I'm about to say. When I first began the work, I used to wonder, why was there so much emphasis placed on Alzheimer's when there was vascular, when there was Parkinson's, when there was frontal temporal, when there is Lewy body? Why is why is it that people think that Alzheimer's is the only disease? I found that to be very confronting. And so, in all of my dementia education for the past 8 years, I had always said that that's going to be my platform. It's not Alzheimer's, it's not FTD, it's not LBD, it's not vascular, it's not Parkinson's, it is dementia, and which includes mild cognitive impairment. It also includes Wernicke-Korsakoff. It also includes others because I wish to highlight all of them because to me, they're equally important. And it just so happened that my husband landed on the FTD side of things. Now, that does not mean I go out and tout FTD and all the work that I do. I could have elected to do that, but I don't find that beneficial for the masses amount of people I engage with. So I talk about the top 5 the most. So that is what I found initially. That is what I honed in on that early on. And from that day to this day, I place great emphasis. I don't care where I present, it is always going to be recognized if it's coming out of my mouth, the top 5 diseases, because they are equally important to me. So I found that to be true. And I know for an absolute fact that my next publication is going to be FTD specific. And I'm going to speak to that because I know that the best. And not only that, only 5 to 10% of people get diagnoses of FTD, and it's often one of the most misunderstood of them all. So I believe it is my responsibility, my responsibility to get the word out in my next publication about FTD. And that's important to me. So I found those 2 things that I think we should be discussing all of them because they're equally important. I found that on the very front end, and I still find it to be true. And even when I hear it, kind of, I'm going to say it. I feel some kind of way if someone says, and related dementias. Well, what is that? What's that? Related dementias. People don't understand that. Let's spell it out. And so whenever I write something, I'm spelling them all out. Let's call them what they are. They're equally important. And so all other dementias, that's never, what does that mean? That is so ambiguous. So let's be clear when we communicate. If we're really, again, trying to reach people, all of them are important.
I think that's so true because there's such a I mean I would imagine feeling like, hey, don't leave me out. I got this thing too. And it's just as hard for me. I mean, we just kind of lumped them all together. And yet when you're the caregiver, you want to be seen. No, maybe not everybody. I'm just assuming, but I mean, there is this thing that we do where we just kind of put them all in one bucket. And you're right. They are individual and and they're not discreetly different. There's some very different, strong differences, right? And so
Oh,
then,
goodness.
right. And so then the treatment, the
Medication?
oh yeah, medication, and some are very hard to. I mean, some are very hard to diagnose, and many have been misdiagnosed. And that happens. I mean, that's certainly what I've learned, learning more and more and more about this. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's important.
Deborah, did you come prepared to read anything from your book?
I do. Do we have time?
Oh yeah, for sure. We like to do that.
Okay. All right. All right. Rahab says she thought her husband had, quote unquote, lost his mind, and she was going to help him find it. Needless to say, Rahab had no idea what life was bringing to her front door. She said there were so many behaviors that she witnessed that she actually thought her marriage was on the brink. The behaviors were so unlike her husband, she wondered if she was going to put up with this new husband of hers. Rahab stated her husband became flippant, rude, selfish, intolerant, unpredictable, and short-fused. Behavior she had never experienced by him. He was also extremely forgetful, easily disoriented with direction, time, and place. He also struggled with simple math computation, sequencing, and keeping up with his personal artifacts. He would take off on trips with little to no notice, and most often without her. When asked about his travels, he would provide answers as though he had no sense of accountability towards his wife, Rahab. For several months, Rahab wondered who this new man was, as it certainly was not the man she had grown to love decades earlier as her husband. She continued to watch and be utterly surprised as the initial months passed. It was as though it was a totally different personality embodied in the man she loved and cared for. In other words, Rahab said he looked just the same, but act totally different. While Rahab watched her husband's behavior over many months, she struggled with living with her husband as it was increasingly difficult. Rahab was on an emotional zip line, initially feeling at her wits' end, angry, frustrated, hurt, and wondering, as she put it, quote, what the hell was going on, end of quote. She prayed regularly, but cried more. She remembers vividly one morning she was up praying and weeping. Her husband came into the living room and sat across from her with some distance and asked her, why was she crying? Rahab said she told him she was hurting. He just looked at her for a couple of seconds and soon said, quote, "I'm going back to bed," end of quote. He never consoled her in any manner with words or encouragement, not caressing either. At that moment, Rahab stated she knew this was medical, as this was not her husband, the father of her 3 children. Rahab never left her husband, as in separation or divorce. She said she often got away from the house to keep her head straight, but returned to the instability of her home. Her husband is currently on medication. Rahab believes she could not live with her husband if he were not on medication. She does see the decline over the years, but the medication helps immensely. The inability has minimized, but it is still a challenge. I asked her, "Why didn't you just divorce him?" She said, "While I had options, divorce was not one of them." And I am Rahab.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That line of I prayed often but cried more. I mean, that's it. That's it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
His
It's
lack of empathy for her. It reminded me of my stepfather because he had the frontotemporal dementia. And when my mom was in a car accident and he was home and never answered the phone when they were calling, and she came home and it was her niece and said, "Marge was in an accident. She's hurt." And he just said, "Oh," and he went back to sleep.
Yeah.
And
that's
it
it.
was, yeah, and he had like, it didn't penetrate that she needed him. So yeah, that sounds like, that hits home.
Yeah. That was the hardest piece for me, you guys, was the
Mhm.
empathy piece, and that left first. Because as a woman, that is part of whom I am in terms of some degree of identity, is to be able to empathize with someone and someone in turn empathizes with me. That's connectivity, if you will. And that was the first piece to go. And that was extraordinarily difficult for me to process through them and understand what that looks like now and work through it on a daily basis. Because if you think about your relationships and you take away empathy, oh my goodness, you get a totally different picture of what that relationship looks like. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah. Appreciate all your thoughts and your knowledge and sharing all of that. It's really helpful, and I think a lot of listeners will enjoy it. Where can readers find your book, and where can they learn more about you?
Thank you for that question. If they travel to Deborah on Dementia, and my name is spelled Debra, Deborah on Dementia, that is an excellent way to keep up with me. That has my podcast library with 187 different podcasts, maybe about 20 minutes a piece, 15 minutes on some, just snapshots about how to cope with dementia. That was one of the things that I did to occupy my time, because right after we got the diagnoses, we went straight into COVID, and I had a lot of time on my hands. That's when I started reminiscing. That's when I did 187 different podcasts. That's when I started planting seeds for my work when we came out of out of COVID well, we're still not out of COVID, but just in the way we're not wearing masks as regularly. So that is there. All of my events are there, including a really important publication. If those who are listening, if you want to do work in your community, Scientific American, which is a renowned publication, did an excerpt along with Bill Gates, and it's on my website and talks about my work in my community. And just that alone should give you a real clue as to how impactful my work is and how important it is to me and how committed I am to the space for Scientific American to pick up my work. And so all that I do is typically there. I can't remember all the great opportunities people invite me to, such as this, that I can't keep up with everything, but I try to keep it on my website. And again, that's DeborahOnDementia.com, and that's where you can keep up with me.
Thank you so much. That's
Yeah,
terrific.
that's amazing. Congratulations on that. And
That
I'm
is-
so glad that you're putting all of this out there. I don't know if anybody has any parting comments. Anybody want to weigh in? Give everybody a chance. If not, I just want to say I really appreciate this. And I think putting this front and center, especially around the disparity in how the medical community is reaching out or failing to reach out and make those connections and making access for people of color to be more, I don't know, correct or right or as robust. And or putting like everybody's all the same. It's all the same. It's like really, it's all about communities. And I think what you're saying is so critical for people to acknowledge, especially in these days and times. So I really do appreciate us talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else have any comment or anything they want to share before we say goodbye to Deborah? See?
Yeah, Malika says thank you so much, Deborah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Wow. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, Kate. All right. So thank
right,
you all for
everybody.
attending Aging and Amazing's Books and Chit Chat with All's Authors. We'd love to see you at our next book discussion on Tuesday, April 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, when we meet Marita Golden, author of the novel The Wide Circumference of Love. You can register for the event in the Books and Chit Chat channel in the Aging and Amazing community or by visiting allsauthors.com, where you will also find Marita's story posted on our blog. I also invite you to be among the first to know everything new at All's Authors as a subscriber to our weekly newsletter. Sign up at allsauthors.com, then check your inbox each week for our news introducing our latest author, podcasts, special events, and more. We do have a special event coming up in April 29th, called Poetry for the Dementia Journey. And that's also a 2:00 event. And if you have any interest in poetry or listening to the poets, it really is a meaningful, beautiful experience. So be sure to visit our blog, our podcast, and shop at allsauthors.com to find more resources for your dementia journey. We've got some lovely gifts for caregivers, including our books and our poetry anthology, as well as some branded clothing and accessories to show your support for All's Authors. And we also have free resources too that are written by the authors themselves. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where we share a wealth of resources for the dementia journey. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Thank you so much for being here.
Al's Authors is celebrating 10 years in 2025. Please help us celebrate. How, you might ask? I'm Christy Byrne Yates, and I'm an Al's author and also the co-host of our podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. Here's how you can help us celebrate this year. Visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter at allsauthors.com. Like and subscribe to our podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Buy books from our authors. We have over 400 authors and every genre is represented. Finally, donate. It's our 10th anniversary, so consider $10 donation or $10,000, whatever works for you. Your generous donation allows us to continue to bring you wonderful authors and informative and supportive content for your dementia journey. We're a registered 501c3 organization, so your donation is tax deductible. Remember, you are not alone. Thank you for your support.